Hello, sewing friends. Thanks for visiting the TurboPurr channel, where we love the sound of happy cats and smooth running sewing machines. My name is Ramona. Today I'll be showing examples of landscape quilting, embellishing with thread and fiber, and framing your masterpiece. This video is for entertainment purposes only. Enjoy. The landscape that I'm showing here was inspired by Ben Hollingsworth's technique. This picture is the result of a class that I took with him recently. I will add a link in the description box with an article showing some of his incredible work. Landscape quilting is not only about landscapes, you could also do portraiture with these techniques. These are the supplies that I used in these examples. Some important things to note are that a lot of variegated threads are used in landscape quilting. I use 30 weight cotton sulky threads, and I used a large top stitch machine needles for those threads. There are some options for temporarily attaching the different fabrics to the background. Um, Glue stick, it can be used. I prefer to have I keep an assortment of different colors of landscape um, cotton fabrics handy, and I fuse them to a fusible sheets where one side is fusible and the other side is sticky back, and that way they're all ready to go. So that when I get to the point where I want to cut out shapes, I just cut them out. They already have sticky back stabilizer on them, and I can put them on my fabric and then move them around as I need to. Here is an array of silky 100% cotton variegated threads. This is the 30 weight that I used in the examples of the landscape quilting that I'm showing you. Please note that actually on this spool, Sulky recommends using a 90/100 top stitch needle. A top stitch needle has a larger eye than some of the other sewing machine needles, and this reduces the friction on the thread. 100% cotton threads are a bit more delicate and than say a polyester or synthetic thread is, and so they need that larger eye to reduce the friction and to reduce the thread breakage. Also, with delicate threads, it's often necessary to slow the machine down some. Generally, with landscape quilting, this is not a problem because we're going for fine details. In doing landscapes and in general art, we are working from the background to the foreground. So in many landscapes, people select a sky fabric, such as a sky blue fabric. There are pre-printed fabrics that have the look of the sky that you can use. In this case, I used a white um, pillowcase fabric that I had cut to size, and I used a spray bottle of water to saturate the white fabric with water. Then we used Cedacolor paints on a foam brush in blue and in yellow to paint a broad swath of those colors to create the look of the sky in the background. I will add a link to the Cedacolor paints in the description box. As you will notice here, the landscape fabrics are put on with raw edge applique. So as I mentioned, I prefer to already have my fabric backed with sticky back stabilizer so I can put them down and then I can lift them and move them, the pieces around as I need to, and I can cut the shapes to the size and the placement that I want them. And so this is part of the background in looking at the backgrounds. Generally the furthest area away from you is the part that has less detail in it. I ran horizontal lines of variegated thread stitching in the gray fabric to simulate the look of like a hillside and to convey that sense of shape with the mirroring of the variegated stitches. I've changed the angles on some of the other stitching that is closer to you. Here is another piece of the art quilt showing a lot of the free motion quilting. I used free motion quilting with the circular shapes um, around in this area. Also, you don't have to free motion quilt all of the time. I used a standard sewing machine foot to create some of the wavy horizontal or wavy vertical straight stitch lines with just using a standard sewing machine foot and the variegated thread with the top stitch needle. Um, so sometimes you can use a regular foot and but the majority of the work is done using um, the free motion technique. I like to use Angelina Fibers sometimes, and the Angelina Fibers, there are some varieties of them. In fact, most varieties of the Angelina Fibers are fusible, and they come in different colors, as you can see in this example. I have basically mixed a bunch of different colors of Angelina Fibers together, kind of shuffled them like a deck of cards and put them together. The Angelina Fibers will only fuse to each other, so they do not fuse to fabric. However, if you wanted to trap things like beads or sequins or other bits of embellishment within the Angelina Fibers, you can do that. You just kind of have to have them wedged in between the other Angelina Fibers, and that way when you put the Angelina Fibers inside your non-stick sheet and use the iron on it, it holds everything together. So by fusing the Angelina Fibers together with a non-stick sheet, you basically are creating an applique. I used the Angelina applique piece. I cut part of my Angelina into strips and bits and used it to simulate the look of water in my landscape. And using a straight stitch and a regular straight stitch foot on the sewing machine with the 30 weight silky variegated thread and the top stitch needle, I did many lines of straight stitching over the Angelina to attach it to the base fabrics on the landscape and to convey the sense of motion in the water. This is another landscape quilt that I did. This one is quite an old quilt that I did some time ago um, during a class that I took where we used sulky products and sulky variegated threads. The yellow tones on this are somewhat faded because this has been hung in a sunny hallway, so it's gotten a lot of light over the years. But there's still vivid color in the greens and in some of the other tones in it. The yellows were created by using fabric crayons. That was a method, another method of creating color rather than using paints or fabric paints. Is crayons are another method that could be used. There are many small pieces in this quilt. The small leaves um, and a lot of the colors within the flowers involve just cutting very small bits of fabric and then free motioning over this. Again, the attached fabrics are all raw edge applique. In this close-up, you can see the different colors of reds and purples and greens within the flowers in this piece. You can also use stippling to hold down some of the background fabric and create texture. Using stitching that goes in different directions within the quilt creates motion and texture. This is also sometimes called thread painting because it really is. It's using your needle and thread to create um, a really painted kind of look to it. I like to use darker colors to create the shadows. So in the case of the fabric with the brick looking pattern on it, a darker color of the tan, yellowish tan was used to create and simulate that look of bricks and create variety between light and dark and creating shadows. I wanted to add a fabric border to this piece, and so when I was done with the thread painting and the landscape part of the quilt, I squared up the quilt and then added the pink border, and on top of that, I added a faux leather border. It's like a type of a vinyl that I sewed on that, and then the last step was that I used a decorative braid embellishment that I had, and I stitched that over the seam to cover the seam between the pink and the brown. And you can see in this picture what the finished border looks like. This piece has been put on stretcher boards and stretched and stapled and had framing supplies put on the back of it so that it could be displayed on a wall. And here is another example of a piece. This is not really a landscape. This is a free motion butterfly over a pieced art quilt. The butterfly is embellished with heat set black crystals, and the piece was put over stretcher board and then stapled stapled to the back of the stretcher board, and hardware was added in order for this to be hung on the wall. So I got the stretcher boards from Hobby Lobby, although those can also be ordered online and I'm sure from other sources. This is basically the layering process with the art quilt on the top, a piece of batting beneath, and I like to use a non-woven mid-weight cutaway stabilizer as the base, and all three layers I iron or press all three layers with the iron in order to make sure that everything is neat and flat, and then wrap the three layers all as one piece around the the base frame or the stretcher board, and then staple it. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this little journey into art quilting. I'd love to know what you are working on. Please leave a comment about what you're sewing. Thank you and have a wonderful day.